Albus. Hi. What are you doing? You wanna look? Who is it? Who is that? Who is that? Oh my goodness. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new to watching, my name is Crystal. Thank you so much for being here in my little corner of YouTube. I'm very excited about today's video because I'm going to be going over some books that I think would be perfect to read during the winter season. I am just ready for winter to officially start. I personally think that winter is like one of the best seasons to read. I don't know what it is about it. Well, I do know. It's cold. The energy is just cozy. It's just the perfect time to like just snuggle up in a blanket with your coffee or your tea and read a book. Like there is nothing better than that. So I'm going to go over some of my favorite books that I think would just be very fitting for the winter time. All right, so I'm just going to jump right in, and I have all my books right here. I'm trying to decide which one I want to talk about first. We are starting this video off strong with The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I have read a lot of Kristen Hanna books, and this one is at the very top of my list. Like, I like this one even more than The Nightingale, even more than Night Road, which I do love those two books, but this one just sits at the top. Everything about this book I just love. I actually want to reread this in 2024. So this is one of the books I just like have been craving to reread. We will see if that happens, but this is the perfect winter read because this is set in Alaska during the winter. So it is very, very snowy. The family that this book surrounds, they have like, I guess you could call it a homestead in Alaska, like kind of in the middle of nowhere. And this really is about their family dynamics, about their survival. They are pretty much alone living out in this Alaska wilderness. They are off the grid. It is very harsh weather. And so they are trying to survive. And they are actually new to Alaska. So they've never been through an Alaskan winter, which I can only imagine is very harsh and brutal. Now, their family is going through some turmoil, I guess you could say. They have some issues within their family and trying to kind of navigate through that, as well as trying to prepare for the upcoming winter in Alaska. So I don't know, this book is just everything to me. It has so many dynamics. It is deep, it is meaningful, it pulls at your heartstrings. You go through every type of emotion reading this. I just think it's absolutely incredible, and you must read it if you have not already. Next up is In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. This right here is the epitome of a winter thriller. It's a little bit creepy, it's dark. It's also set in a house like in the middle of the woods during the winter time, so it's very snowy. The atmosphere is just impeccable for a winter read, and there is obviously a mystery attached to this, and the mystery is just like slowly unraveling. This is a really good like whodunit type of book. Essentially, this book is about a girl who ends up going out into this house in the middle of the woods for her friend's bachelorette party, and what is supposed to be a cozy, fun-filled weekend with her friends turns out to be something more than she would have ever expected. I'll just leave it at that. Now, I don't think that the writing in this is like absolutely amazing. I think Ruth Ware's books are hit or miss, although I have enjoyed the books that I have read by her. I really enjoyed this one. I also really liked The Woman in Cabin 10. They're not 5-star reads for me, but I do think that her books are fun and entertaining. They're just really like fast-paced thrillers. And this one is just the perfect one to read during the winter time because of the setting. It is very snowy. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in this cabin. So yeah, if you're looking for just a really fun, fast-paced, snowy thriller, I would highly recommend this one. All right, the next books I'm going to recommend are, of course, the Twilight series. I feel like I can't do a fall or winter book recommendations video without mentioning the Twilight series. This was also in my fall recommendations video as well, but these books are just, they are so cozy, and the setting of these, like just the vibe and the atmosphere is they're just perfect books to read during the fall and the winter, because these books are set in Forks, Washington, which is basically dark and cold and rainy and gloomy and dreary. It's just like, when I think of the weather there, I think of the fall and the winter time, at least in my mind. This is young adult fantasy, if you have no idea what Twilight is, which I feel like most people do, but this is about vampires and werewolves, and there's also a love story attached to this as well. I mean, are the books a little bit cheesy and corny? Yeah, but they are so So fun and entertaining. So if you've not read the Twilight series, I think they're absolute must reads for the winter time. Also, if you've not seen the movies, I think they're really good movies to watch in the winter as well. Okay, next up, I want to talk about Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This is a dark romance. I don't know why this gives me winter vibes, but it does. I think it's just because the timeline takes you through the winter time. Like it starts in the fall and then goes through winter and Christmas and everything. So maybe that's why it gives me. This is not like a cozy, fluffy, comforting read. This is dark. There are some pretty graphic scenes. Check the trigger warnings if you are more of a sensitive reader. I would say that the first half of this book is somewhat tough to read in certain scenes. This is about Cora and Dean, and one night they get abducted and they are being held captive in a random stranger's basement. They don't know why. They don't know why they were abducted, but they are just trying to survive, basically. The things that they go through in this basement are very traumatic and changes the course of their life and their relationship. It is just such an incredible read. I don't think that this book is for everyone, but I personally loved it. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. But again, this book does have dark topics, dark themes. I will say though, the second part of this book is much easier to read. It becomes more of like your typical adult romance rather than a dark romance. So, but the first half is absolutely there are some dark triggering topics talked about in the first half of this book. But if you are someone who likes the dark romance genre and you have not read this, I'm telling you, this is a must read. All right, next up we have The Girls in the Cabin by Caleb Stevens. Y'all, this is one of my favorite thrillers ever. I talk about this book so much, and that is for good reason. This right here, if you are looking for a winter thriller, please, I'm begging you to read this book. This has not only the best setting for a winter read, but the storyline of this is just so unique and so different. This book is about Chris, and he takes his two daughters out to go on a camping trip. In order to get to their camping site, they have to kind of do a little bit of hiking through the mountains. Well, one of them ends up getting injured, and so they are needing to find help. They're needing to find shelter, but they are in the middle of the wilderness. Like they don't know where to go. They don't have cell service. And so they start searching for help, and they end up finding this random cabin in the woods, and they're just relieved to have found help. But what they find when they get to this cabin is unlike anything that they would have imagined or expected. This is also told in two different timelines. So it's set in the past and also set in the present. And then the timelines just kind of end up merging as the story goes on. The writing is so immersive. You literally feel like you are there with these characters. I just picture like snuggling up with a blanket on a rainy, stormy winter night and just binging this book. Also, Caleb Stevens is an independent author, so one of the best ways that we can support independent authors is by reading their books and sharing them, and this is one that I will always share. It's just one of my favorite books ever. My next winter book recommendation is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I would consider this a historical fantasy romance. Yes. It has a very big romance plot, but it also has touches of fantasy and also is set in the early 1900s. So it has that historical vibe as well. I literally felt like I was on the set of a 1920s movie while I was reading this, and it was just everything to me. I devoured this book. I loved everything about it. It has a very cozy and comforting like energy to it. That's the only way I can describe it. Energy of the wintertime is just different. It's just such a comforting time of year, I think, at least for me. And I just feel like this book gives that kind of energy. This book is about Iris and Roman, and they are two journalists who are basically competing to be columnists at the paper that they write for. So they don't really get along very well. Now, Iris's brother is on the front lines of the war that is happening. And the war that is happening is not the typical war that you would think of. The war is between two gods. And so that's where the fantasy aspect comes in. So her brother is fighting on the front lines, and she starts writing him letters. And she's putting these letters in the wardrobe in her room. And this is like some kind of magical wardrobe where the letters are transported from the wardrobe to the person. Kind of reminds me of Narnia a little bit in a way. But these letters that she is sending off to her brother end up in the hands of Roman. And then Roman begins to write her back, but Iris does not know who these letters are coming from. They start typing these letters through these magical typewriters. They start exchanging these letters that are written on these magical typewriters, and they kind of form this magical bond and this magical friendship through these letters. And by the way, none of this is spoilers. You can find all of this in the synopsis of the book. The end of this book had me like, just my heart. It just had my heart. And I pre-ordered the second book so fast. The second book actually comes out at the end of this month, so I will probably be reading that book in January. This book is just absolutely lovely, and if you haven't read it, please give it a chance. It is so good. It does have that historical aspect, and I'm someone who doesn't really like historical types of books, but this one's an exception. The romance in this is so sweet and so wholesome. It just gives me that like warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart. Does that make sense? Because that is exactly how this book makes me feel. These next books, very similar to what I said about Twilight. I cannot film a fall or winter book recommendations without talking about this series. It is one of my favorites of all time. And if you know me, you know exactly what books I'm about to hold up. Obviously, the Harry Potter series. This series is just a part of my soul. This right here is the series that got me back into reading. I have always been a reader, but once I read this series, that's when I feel like I officially started my reading journey. It just made me want to read everything. It got me back into my love of reading. I've always had a book that I'm reading, but sometimes it would take me like a couple of months to get through a book or something. But once I read this series, that is when I feel like I just immersed myself into the book world. Not only is the writing of this series just incredible, the atmosphere and the setting of these books, they just scream fall and winter. There are some scenes in here that take place during Christmas, and it's just the coziest, warmest, most comforting atmosphere that you can possibly get in a book. And Hogwarts, like the school that they're in, is darker, there's candlelight everywhere. I'm gonna put a picture of Hogwarts right here so that you can see what I mean, but it's just like these wooden staircases and these magical secret rooms and the classrooms that they're in. Even when they go to class, you just get this like comforting, cozy vibe. And don't let the fact that this is young adult stray you away from reading this series, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's Harry Potter, it's just for kids, like I'm not gonna read that. I didn't read this series until I was an adult, and I actually think that you will appreciate this series more if you read it as an adult. I think that the first couple of books read very young adult, but as the series starts to go on, the storyline gets so much more complex. And honestly, if I would have read these books as a kid, like when I was younger, I probably would have been so lost. I'd have been like, wait, what is going on? Like, especially in the later books, because like I said, the storyline and the writing does get more complex as the books go on. So me reading this series as an adult, I'm so glad that I waited, because I just feel like I was able to appreciate it and understand it a lot more reading it as an adult than if I were to have read it as a kid. But I promise you, if you have not read this yet, you are gonna have such a great experience if you decide to read this series. It's incredible, and the winter time is the best time to do it. Okay, this next book that I want to talk about is a book I actually haven't even read yet, but I wanted to include it in this video, number one, because I love this author, and anything that she writes, I highly doubt is a bad book. So I want to recommend it because I just trust this author, and I know that everything she writes is going to be good. And that is Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. We are actually reading this in my book club in January, which is why I haven't read it yet, but I wanted to include it in this video because I just think it's going to be the perfect winter read. And again, I love Darcy Coates. I just love her as an author, and I have a feeling that I'm really going to love this book, at least I hope. But I'm going to read the back really quick. When Krista joins a tour group heading deep into the Rocky Mountains, she's hopeful this will be her chance to put the ghosts of her past to rest. When a bitterly cold snowstorm sweeps the region, the small group is forced to take shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. Despite the uncomfortably claustrophobic quarters and rapidly dropping temperature, Krista believes they'll be safe as they wait out the storm. She couldn't be more wrong. Deep in the night, their tour guide goes missing, only to be discovered the following morning, his severed head impaled on a tree outside the cabin. Terrified and completely isolated by the storm, Krista finds herself trapped with 8 total strangers. One of them kills for sport, and they are far from finished. As the storm grows more dangerous and the number of survivors dwindles one by one, Krista must decide whom she can trust before this frozen mountain becomes her tomb. Are you kidding? Like, that sounds so good. That is exactly why I wanted to recommend this book, even though I haven't read it. And I can't wait to read this in January. Like, I am just like, oh, I'm so excited. It's just gonna give all the winter vibes. I mean, look at this cover too. If this cover alone doesn't sell you to read this, I don't know what will. And I feel like Darcy Coates does no wrong. If you have not read a Darcy Coates book, this is your sign. Another one of my favorite books by her is House of Shadows. That one is like the perfect, just spooky, dark read. It has a paranormal theme to it. So if you like those kind of books, I would highly recommend House of Shadows. But anyway, Dead of Winter, haven't read it yet. Can't wait to read it. Absolutely add this to your TBR for the winter time. All right, y'all, that is it for my winter book recommendations. I hope y'all enjoyed watching this, and I also hope that you found some new books to add to your TBR for this upcoming winter season. I am so excited. I am ready to be cozy and I'm ready to be cold. I'm ready to just put on my onesies with my slippers and my big blanket and my cup of coffee and just read a book. That's the life. That is it for me today, y'all. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will hopefully see y'all in my next video.